It's hard now to conceive of how amazing the Dambusters raid was to the people of Britain. In 1943, France and most of Europe had been in Nazi hands for 3 years. Britain was fighting for her freedom. For a long time, her only hope had lain with the young men of Bomber Command.
I think most people who flew on operations, it became sort of a drug, really. Excitement, you know. I mean, I was riding high-speed motorbikes before I joined the RAF, you know, on the road, and I mean, it's thrilling, you know. It's that sort of atmosphere.
By 1943, the countryside of England was speckled with aerodromes. Well over 1 million people had been drafted into the RAF. Prime Minister Winston Churchill's orders to the Air Force were to take the fight to the Germans, to weaken their military machine, and to pave the way for a land invasion. Every night, thousands braved the skies over the heavily defended industrial cities of Germany. Their chances of survival were less than 1 in 3.
And me and another chap, we volunteered. And when the other lads found we'd volunteered, they said, "You must be crazy." We were losing about 50 aircraft a night at that time.
And it was kind of excitement at the time. When you're 18, you've got no feeling of being killed or anything ever happening to you. You're going to go on forever. And it was exciting.
But it would take more than bravery under fire to win the war. In 1939, the RAF had predicted it could easily hit single factories. Experience proved otherwise. In early 1941, the average night bombing error was thought to be around 1,000 yards. An analysis later in the year revealed a terrifying truth. Only 1 in 3 attacks were within 5 miles of the target. Despite the heavy and persistent raids, German morale and industrial production showed little sign of weakening. To prove the effectiveness of air power, the RAF decided to bomb the unbombable, the massive hydroelectric dams of Germany's industrial heartland. Barnes Wallis, one of the most imaginative scientists of the war, had created a 5-ton bomb that bounced across water. The only problem was, it took unprecedented skill and heroism to launch it. Against overwhelming odds, the Dambusters gave Britain the triumph it so badly needed.
We were spot on, absolutely spot on. We'd hit right in the middle, and the bottom came out initially. Just blew a hole straight through it, and then the top fell away. And that was it.
The Dambusters mission is still considered one of the most technically difficult pieces of flying ever attempted. 133 men, some only 19 and 20, had to navigate their way for almost 7 hours at night at an altitude of only 100 feet. Nearly half of the aircraft did not make it back to England. Only 48 of the airmen made it through the war. Today, only 7 are still here to tell their story.
I remember everything about it. There's nothing wrong with my brain, you know.
I'm still alive, and I think the chances of survival at that time were not good.
No, you never think you're going to die. You don't reckon on that. We always assumed if the Germans shot you down, they were dead lucky. Anyhow, we had to go, that was our job.
When you think of the average age of the squadron, I mean, and you look at the people of 21 and 22 today, and you try to relate to them sort of people that I know are 21, that are flying a Lancaster aircraft, you know, over enemy territory and so on. It's awesome, really.
To show just how incredibly difficult the Dams raid of 60 years ago was, we enlisted the help of the present-day RAF. We've chosen 8 young aircrew who match the ages of the original crews of 60 years ago. They are going to become the Dambusters of 1943. Today's crews rely utterly on computers. They often fly alone. These young people are going to travel back to a time when human skill and daring made the most of low technology. It was an era when you had to place your life in the hands of the people sitting next to you. They are going to find out what it took to become a Dambuster. These 8 young RAF aircrew are going to study every aspect of the famous 1943 Dambusters air raid. The foremost historian of the Dams raid, Dr. John Sweetman, will take them round RAF Scampton, the former home of the Dambuster Squadron. He will be their guide to a world which is fast decaying from memory. Our modern crew are going to discover what it took to be a Dambuster. They'll also meet their counterparts of 60 years ago. And they'll get their hands on one of the only 2 flying Lancasters in the world. Ultimately, their mission will be to fly the whole 7-hour Dambusters raid again in the dark at 100 feet. We can't recreate wartime conditions, but this computer-controlled Lancaster will make the experience as close to the real thing as possible. Designed for this program by the Department of Aeronautics at Southampton University and aviation software experts Just Flight, the 7-person simulator accurately replicates all the flight controls and characteristics of a 1943 Lancaster loaded with a 5-ton bouncing bomb. The world they will fly in is a computer landscape generated from satellite data, complete with lakes, dams, towns, factories, and most importantly, enemy gunfire. It's accurate to within 3 meters of the real world. Even the weather, stars and moon of the actual night 60 years ago are exactly as they were.
The whole thing is quite extraordinary, the amount of training that they had, and to go off and fly the route that they flew at night, at low level, in wartime, operationally, must have just been so intense. It's unbelievable to think that they actually went out there and did it. And yes, they lost a lot of crews. The guys that got back, it's a massive achievement.
Our modern-day crew are going to find out just how massive that achievement really was. Aeronautical engineer Barnes Wallis was the genius behind the Dams raid. But the idea didn't just come to him out of the blue. Ever since Hitler had come to power in the 1930s, the Dams had been a top-secret RAF target. Then, as now, planners and strategists dreamt of miraculous missions that would cripple the enemy, the knockout blow that would end the war in one fell swoop. The fact that they rarely worked didn't stop boffin after boffin cooking up the latest ultimate weapon.
There have been all sorts of harebrained people running around Air Ministry, as he says, with these harebrained schemes, one of which was that you would set fire to the Black Forest by dropping rats with incendiaries on their tails. I mean, that was one of the wildest ones.
The dams of the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland, held up one such fantastic opportunity. Two key dams, the Myrna and the Sorpe, supplied 2/3 of the water for the war industry in the Ruhr area. The RAF had long believed that if breached together, they would destroy vital water supplies to hundreds of steel and armaments factories. It would be a decisive blow to German military might. The Germans were only too aware of this Achilles heel. The dams were heavily defended with anti-aircraft batteries along their crests and torpedo nets along the waterside. Attacking the dams was thought to be technically impossible. At over 1,000 feet wide and 120 feet tall, the Myrna in particular was an immense structure. Built in 1913, it weighed in at over 500,000 tons of concrete and stone. It held back over 130 million tons of water. Messrs. Nobel, the dynamite manufacturers, had calculated that well over 10 tons of explosive laid at its base would be needed to crack it. That was far beyond the capabilities of saboteurs. And bombers back then were just too slow and gutless to haul anything like that weight. Various alternative ideas were put forward throughout the late 30s. Committee after committee sat to consider one invention after another. In 1940, the head of Bomber Command was Sir Charles Portal. He championed a plan to attack the dams by specially designed torpedo bombers, but it was not pursued at the time. The idea would, however, stick in his head. Later in the year, an idea by a scientist at the Air Ministry's Research Department, Wing Commander Charles Finch Noyes, was also considered. Its design was strangely prophetic. He proposed a rocket-powered torpedo, which would be launched by a bomber flying low over the water. The device would skim across the surface, over the torpedo nets, hit the dam wall, sink to 40 feet, and explode by means of a pressure trigger. Unfortunately, Finch Noyes could not guarantee the required degree of accuracy. His idea never got beyond the planning stage. For the next 3 years, the Ruhr dams retained their aura of Mission Impossible. Meanwhile, one of the crews who would be pivotal to the success of the dam's operation was just forming. Pilot Les Knight, flight engineer Ray Grayston, bomb aimer Johnny Johnson, navigator Sidney Hobday, wireless op Bob Kello, and gunners Doc Sutherland and Harry O'Brien became a slick team, precise, determined, and courageous. "60 years on, 3 of that crew, Doc, Ray, and Johnny, are still around.
Amazing, really.
Their fondest memories were of their 20-year-old Australian pilot, Les Knight.
Well, Les Knight, he came out straight out of college, didn't he? And was trained in South Africa. He couldn't ride a bike, he couldn't drive a car, and he could fly a Lancaster. He could, didn't he? Incredible chap. Really brilliant.
Les Knight and his boys would soon be picked to join the best of the best, to form an elite band of hotshots. They would become the founding members of a famous squadron. They would become the Dambusters. "60 years on, that squadron is still around. 617 Squadron, the Dambusters, still specialize in flying low-level precision missions, but now they fly Tornado attack aircraft at only 100 feet above the ground. These days, it's all done by computers and terrain following radar. The modern bomber pilot is a cyborg. He interacts with an intelligent aircraft linked to satellites that knows exactly where it is and where it is going at any instant. When we asked the Squadron what made the cruise in 1943 so special, the answer, surprisingly, was not just barnstorming flying skills. The key to success in 1943 was navigation. Getting lost over Germany could be fatal. And back then, it was all done by map, pencil, stopwatch, and compass.
Do not know where you are precisely at any one moment, but you know pretty much where you ought to be in 5 minutes' time. So you're trying to project ahead using a mental dead reckoning techniques such that in 5 minutes you look out the window and you see what you expect to see. Nowadays, you can pretty much guarantee that would be the case. 60 years ago, you couldn't. You were relying on the entire crew to look out of whatever windows they had available to them to try and find the things which the navigator sitting in his black hole in the middle of the airplane would describe to them.
What we use now on the Tornado Force is the Tornado Advanced Mission Planning System, and we start with a computer model terrain base with all the mapping overlaid onto that, and we can plan the entire mission on the computer, and then before we go to the airplane we'll put all the data onto a data brick which will be transferred to the aircraft once we're in there. If push, we could plan a route in less than 20 minutes.
With so much technology at their fingertips, the traditional map, pencil and compass method is soon a distant memory. If we wanted a crew that would come close to recreating the original operation, the Dambusters suggested we should enlist young flyers straight out of flight school.
What do you reckon?
Cranwell.
Basic training, without a doubt. Before somebody's had the real basics of MDR navigation drawn out of him and then forgotten by the use and reliance on the computer systems that we use now.
You did your first tour on Lanxo, didn't you?
Thank you very much.
RAF Cranwell in Lincolnshire is home to No. 3 Multi-Engine Flying School. They specialize in training young pilots to fly the nearest thing the Air Force still has to a World War II bomber. Here they prepare to fly propeller engine transport planes. RAF Cranwell is where our crew will master the art of navigation, World War II style. All these recent graduates were waiting to be posted to the next squadron. Now they're going to be turned into the Dambusters of 60 years ago. Flight Lieutenant Andy Griffiths is soon to fly Hercules transport planes. Flying officers Frankie Buchler and Paul Brandt are trainee fighter pilots. Flight Lieutenant Lucy Robinson is a 26-year-old fighter pilot who will soon move over to flying in-flight refueling jets. Sergeants Al Chevis, Ben Tapper Knight, Terry Livingston and Molly Mulkenthin are all airborne electronics specialists trained to fly in the back of RAF Nimrods looking for submarines.
Well, we're going to teach them how to work in this team and how to make a successful job of navigating the aeroplane around. What we need to do is to teach them the specific jobs they need to do and then let them get on with it.
But right from day one, our crew has worked out that the navigator's job is the one to be avoided.
Not the nav.
Nobody wants to be nav.
Really? Yeah, everyone's in the same thing about that. No one really wants to be the nav because they know how hard it's going to be and no one can mess up the
Pressure's on, full stop in it, the nav.
It's always a busy day at the RAF Navigational Training Centre, but busier than usual when a new batch of pilots arrives to start work at this University of the Royal Air Force. A pilot doesn't get his wings until he has a good knowledge of navigation, but here he receives complete instruction which enables him to find a pinpoint on a map and get home without getting lost. So back they go to desk and blackboard. They learn all there is to know about the various instruments which guide them in flight.
With this instrument, you can locate your position over the ground, even though the ground is obscured by cloud or darkness.
It is this thoroughness in training that makes the RAF pilot the best in the world.
Our young crew has had a good recent training in the art of navigation. The biggest problem they will have is that they have little practice of thinking and working together like a crew of 60 years ago. They are the PlayStation generation, more used to relying on a computer than a human.
All ready down the back? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm your training officer for this exercise, and my duty will be to either instruct or to modify your views of navigation, the sort of navigation we would be using 60 years ago. If you'd like to look into the envelopes in front of you, you'll find there is a half-mil map with a route drawn on it. If you find Cromwell...
The team's first lesson is how to plan a mission as a crew.
Looking at that map...
The crux of flying low-level, World War II style, is map reading as a team. It's a bit like hill walking at night, only 100 times faster. It's incredibly difficult to recognize features in the dark when flying low. Railway lines, roads, hills, water features like lakes or distinctive bends in rivers rush past at speed. Sometimes it's better to zigzag between easy-to-detect landmarks than to fly straight over featureless terrain. Our crew are used to flying around the Midlands and North England at 3,000 feet. Occasionally, they're allowed down to 250 feet. Now, they're going to experience the exhilarating altitudes flown by the DAMS crews.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I mean, 60 feet as well. I mean, we've never flown that low, like 250 feet. As Annie was saying, is what we fly at. So it's going to be interesting to fly solo, and also to see a different area and everything, and at night.
For our modern crew, learning to navigate as a team is all good fun. For the young crews of 60 years ago, it was deadly serious. The equivalent of doing a maths exam in the dark while being shot at.
A lot of the people were killed because the navigation was poor. They got off track, they got lost in wind change, and never even got back to the British Isles. They flew down the channel and out to sea. I mean, all sorts of things happened.
To have even a chance of succeeding on the DAMS raid, our crew's navigation is going to have to be up there with the best of the best. Like many intellectuals, Barnes Wallis wanted to solve the unsolvable. As a senior aeronautical engineer at Vickers Armstrong, he knew the Ruhr dams were a key target and that it would take a huge device to destroy them. His first idea was a high-altitude 10-ton bomb. He had enough support within the defense establishment to be allowed to carry out scale tests. The results were not what Wallis wanted to hear. Exploding 10-ton bombs even close to the dam could not guarantee its destruction. That might have been the end of the matter had it not been for the curiosity of the scientist in charge of the tests, Dick Collins. Unofficially, he detonated a charge in contact with the water side of the wall. It shattered. Wallis got the bit back between his teeth. And Collins was given permission to test his new discovery on a full-sized disused dam in Wales. In Wallis's presence, he proved that a much smaller charge, less than 5 tons, could destroy a dam if placed in direct contact with the dam wall. Professor Kuldeep Verdi is an expert on why large structures like dams and bridges fail. He understands why Collins' model dam was destroyed. His computational engineering model demonstrates the flow of shock waves through masonry. If the shock wave turns black at any point, the dam will break. The first test is a 10-ton explosion in the water a mere 30 feet from the dam.
There is the impact, stresses have increased, but after the impact, the shock wave has spread around and in fact there's no way on the main dam the stresses are anywhere near failure.
Even at this tiny distance, the water absorbs the explosion. In fact, even a 10-ton direct hit on top of the dam will have minimal effect. However, when the 5-ton bomb is placed against the wall on the water side, 40 feet down, the effects are immense. The explosion instantly blasts a hole in the dam wall. The water now acts like a huge backplate, forcing the shock wave through the wall.
So before the impulse has finished, a big part of the dam has already been damaged and the dam has exploded.
But in an era long before guided missiles, when the average bombing error was measured in miles, how was anyone going to get an underwater bomb 400 miles inland into a heavily guarded lake and into direct contact with a dam wall which was protected by torpedo nets? At least there was one piece of good news. The reduced bomb weight of 5 tons was well within the capacity of the latest addition to the bomber fleet. The recently introduced Avro Lancaster was the most successful bomber of World War II. In early 1943, it was coming off the production line at a rate of over 100 a month. Designed by Roy Chadwick, the Lancaster was leaps ahead of earlier machines. This 4-engined, elegant war machine could carry its crew of 7 and over 6 tons of bombs at over 250 miles an hour. Yet it was also capable of remarkable aerobatic feats, as young Les Knight proved to his crew when they were caught by a searchlight over Germany.
All of a sudden it locked on us, and Les just, without a moment's hesitation, just stuffed the nose straight down. And Hobday has a little clock on his desk, and he said we were going 450 miles an hour.
With the plane dropping at twice its normal speed, Les Knight struggled to haul it out of the dive.
And it wouldn't pull because we were too much G or whatever. Finally we got up and we were very low to the ground, but we got rid of the searchlight.
The gunners were good at their job. Bobby, the navigator, was brilliant. Johnny was absolutely brilliant because he was a navigator and he volunteered to do bomb-hammer's job. So we were dead lucky in our crew. We had 2 navigators and the pilot's navigator, so we had 3. That's why I'm here today.
The preliminary navigation training is over. Now it's time for our young crew to discover what their roles will be in our recreation of the Dambusters raid.
From our point of view, from current day RAF, this is a meritocracy, and there would be no concept of picking somebody for any job if they weren't up for it and up to it. And the results of the Swedish jury is? The first thing is that it's been, as you've gathered, we've been away for about 40 minutes now, and it's been very difficult to decide between you. You've all come from different backgrounds. You've taken on some stuff which is fairly much outside the specialities, and you've done fairly well at that. So that first thing is very good. It bodes very well for the mission. Right then, in no particular order, Frankie, we want you to be the first reserve spare. On the day, you're also going to be playing the part of 5 group. And you'll be used outside the simulator, and no doubt the crew will want to interview you, talking about what's going on inside, because you've had the training as well. Right. Stand up the man whose grandfather was a rear gunner. And the rear gunner has got a very good view of landmarks which have already been and passed. So everybody's going to be navigating here, everybody's going to be part of this mission. Andy. Step up the man whose ATC instructor was a wireless operator.
Fine, that'll do it.
Terry, front gunner. Again, a set of eyes that's the first to see everything coming up and in a good position. Molly, I want you to be the bomb aimer and go to Canada. Excellent. I think we're happy with that then. Ben? I'd like you to be the flight engineer. When you fly it, you're going to be into everything. The numbers are getting thinner, aren't they? Lucy, I want you to be the pilot and the captain.
Excellent.
Your job is to keep this aeroplane away from the ground, but not very far away from the ground. Okay, so we'll need to be concentrating on that as we go along. Good. Paul, no guessing for what I have in reserve for you. I know it's no surprise to me that this group has been very keen not to be the navigator. However, what I would say is that the navigator is quite possibly the most crucial element to this. If you don't find the dam, you ain't going to attack it. Are we all happy?
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent.
Naturally, chief interest is focused on the Lancaster's crew. The rear gunner, ready to shoot down Nazi night fighters who come in from astern. The wireless operator, the mouthpiece of the Lancaster. The observer navigator, the wizard who finds the way. The flight engineer, a comparatively new rank for heavy bombers, but a great man in an emergency. The captain of the aircraft. Finally, the bomb aimer, also an air gunner, who plants his bombs where they hurt most. Good luck to them all.
Now they have been assigned their place in the aircraft, our crew will try to mirror the Dambusters' operation as it was flown by the crew of Les Knight's plane. Les, Ray, Doc, Johnny and the others were given 7 weeks special training for the dam's raid. Lucy and her crew will have the same.
I've got a friend who, an old friend back home, and a crash landing one day, this ball came off its stanchions and broke both his legs. And he dragged him out thinking it might burn the aircraft, but it never burned. Scary.
It's pretty impressive. It's a good view as well. Good vision.
That's alright, I like it. I don't know if I'd like it after 8 hours.
I feel a bit exposed up here because, I mean, it's such a great view compared to what we get nowadays. But you just feel like it's target practice for you.
It's a bit cramped. It's a bit hot, a bit lonely back here where the door's shut. I wouldn't like to get out of here in a hurry, put it that way.
After 2 weeks of navigation training, our crew now have 5 weeks in the simulator to learn everything the crews of 60 years ago knew about operational flying. The simulator is laid out exactly like the insides of a Lancaster. The mission is designed to get them accustomed to the aircraft. They're to fly out of Cranwell in daylight, navigate around the local area, which they know like the back of their hands, and then come back and land. It should be easy.
And we'll just sort of see if we can get it going. I can't remember how to start it though. All right then, crew checking.
Wireless operator.
Engine.
Bomb aimer. Front gunner.
Right then. Complete. Should we go for it?
It's complete, right.
I'm just waiting for a green light for takeoff. Here we go, everyone. Speed reading.
80 knots.
Tail wheels up.
90.
Let's see if we can go for it now.
Roger, 100 knots. 110.
Okay, positive ready climb. Take gear up, please.
Now, this is bomb aimer, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, bomb aimer.
What does everyone reckon about this height? Quite high? We're at medium level here.
Why don't we just stay at medium level to start with?
Okay.
Lucy is keen to take the plane down to low level, but the navigator Branty needs more height to find his landmarks. He is experiencing the classic dilemma of a low-flying navigator.
Just ease up to something like 3,000 feet or 4,000 feet.
They quickly get lost. Even at medium level by day, the crew find it hard to identify the turning points along their route.
Nav, bomb aimer, got on the horizon what looks like 3 power stations. In our right, 2 o'clock.
I'm not entirely sure which power stations
I've
you're
got a
talking
feeling
about.
this town might be Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
Nav, got the Humber Bridge.
What's adding to the confusion is that the Lancaster has a huge turning circle compared to the little jets and turboprops Lucy is used to flying.
I think I've got an idea of the turning circle of this thing now.
Yeah, massive.
Our crew have spent so long wandering around trying to get their bearings that they have run out of fuel.
Turn the wrong way. Whee!
They are immediately diverted to the nearest airstrip.
Captain from wireless operator.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've got instructions, 1 circuit and then land.
Okay. Or crash.
I'll go for the first option.
Anybody see an airfield out there?
This is the bit where the wireless operator gets behind the main spar for the lander.
I'm just trying to find the runway at the moment, wireless.
Airfield 11 o'clock.
Got it. I'll just put it down on the runway, on the airfield somewhere, guys, so... Make sure your harnesses are tight.
We'll be behind the main spar then.
I'm going to join you, I think.
There we go. Stop.
As soon as you get here.
We're heading straight for the runway caravan. Be nice to stop.
I don't have any brakes, I can't stop.
All good fun. But our crew were a long way from achieving the kind of accurate, clinical flying needed to launch a device as demanding as Barnes Wallis's bouncing bomb. Barnes Wallis came up with the idea of bouncing a bomb across water in early 1942. How he did is still shrouded in mystery. His first idea to drop a huge bomb from high altitude had floundered. Experiments with scale models had shown the bomb would have to explode in direct contact with the dam, something that would be impossible by conventional methods.
The chance of hitting that dam was so small, we had to set up 617 Squadron with a special weapon to hit it. And the reason we did that was we couldn't hit it from 15,000, 20,000 feet.
From 20,000 feet, the dam is a tiny target. Somehow the bomb would have to be dropped very low over the lake, skimmed into position with inch-perfect accuracy, and stay in contact with the dam wall.
And that's important because otherwise what happens is that this
Arthur Kears is a geometric propulsion expert at the former Royal Aircraft Establishment, now known as Kinetic. For the last year, he has been digging into the history of upkeep, the code name for Barnes Wallis's device.
What he did first of all was he went and did the famous experiments in the garden with the marbles and his children, bouncing marbles off a tin bath full of water, as far as we can see, and then measuring where the marbles then fell after the first bounce. He'd also done perhaps what you'd expect him to do, which was to go and do a literature search for things, and he'd discovered this textbook on ballistics, which covered some experiments which were done in the early 1900s on bouncing brass balls off of water, which had this business about the critical angle of 7 degrees in it.
Wallis's first experiments in May of 1942 with marbles and then in test tanks at the National Physical Laboratory confirmed that a heavy object will not skip off the water at an angle of greater than 7 degrees. To get a bomb to bounce would mean flying incredibly low.
To get something like 7 degrees with upkeep would have meant flying at a height of 13.5 metres above the water, which is seriously low. It's about sort of 45, 50 feet. And we know subsequently from the trials footage that flying below 60 feet was a fairly dangerous activity.
The only way Wallis could solve this problem was to build a full-scale prototype. But the results failed to impress the head of Bomber Command, Sir Arthur Harris.
Now you think you sit in Harris's office, here's somebody comes up with an idea of putting a 5-ton lump of iron across a lake, bouncing it across. Bomber Harris said, this tripe of the wildest description. I bet my shirt it will never work.
Harris's objections were unsurprising, but in February of 1943, someone further up the ladder overruled him. Sir Charles Portal, who had been the previous head of Bomber Command, was now Chief of the Air Staff. His own scheme to destroy the Ruhr dams had failed. He wanted another crack.
In 1940, Portal had been AOC&C Bomber Command, the position held by Harris. And when he was AOC&C Bomber Command in 1940, he had put up a scheme to attack the Myrna Dam. Now that was turned down at the time, but you can see the thinking. Here is somebody comes up with an idea. Psychologically, he's very much, in his mind, and it's quite clear that he overrules Harris's objections.
Portal's advisors told him that the best time to attack the dams would be in mid-May, when the waters were at their highest. The timing would prove extremely opportune for Winston Churchill. He would be in America, planning the invasion of Europe. The dam's raid, if successful, would give him the chance to emphasize the effectiveness of the RAF over Germany. Portal instructed Harris to immediately form a new squadron. From all round England, crews were pulled from their squadrons. When they arrived at RAF Scampton on the 21st of March 1943, they were told absolutely nothing about the up-and-coming raid. Secrecy was crucial. They didn't even know that they now had just over 7 weeks to prepare. Lancaster pilots and their crews started to arrive at RAF Scampton in March 1943. One of the first was New Zealander Les Munro.
It was interesting to arrive and find that there was a large number of very experienced crew congregating there. The question, of course, was on everybody's lips, was what are we here for? What's the target going to be?
Bomber Harris chose one of the most accomplished pilots of the war to lead the new squadron. Wing Commander Guy Gibson was a veteran of over 160 air operations, well past the minimum of 30 required for completion of a tour of duty. He was only 24 years old, and he had a reputation.
You just imagine you're on the carpet in front of Gibson now.
When you went in Gibson's office or in his presence, you knew he was the boss. And I suppose that's how it's got to be.
He could not brook anybody that didn't toe the line. So he was therefore a strict disciplinarian. And lots of the sergeants didn't like it in particular. They thought that he was an officer's man, but he was a commanding officer of his time. He had a funny little pop-pop bicycle, which he used to go around a Perry track on. And if anybody didn't salute him, he used to stop and bawl them out.
First thing he said to me when I came out of his office, now I'd been installed as adjutant to the 617 Squadron, that this squadron will either make history or be wiped out.
Getting the crews knocked into shape was no mean feat, considering their young ages and renowned tendency to enjoy a good time.
This character, Brian Goodale, when we went down for the investiture, they debagged him, and he was running down the corridor in his underpants.
The trouser remove was a standard thing for, to be initiated into the squadron.
That was a character. Flight engineer Tiny Henderson. And when he'd had a drink, he went absolutely berserk.
There were times in some messes where they packed down football scrums, trying to walk up a wall and across the ceiling and leaving your footprints behind.
I got after me on one occasion. I heard someone say in the mess, what about taking the Adju's trousers down, you see? Well, I wasn't very keen on that. Believe it or not, I climbed out of the window and shimmed down the drain pipe. And they found out I'd done this, and I was sort of a hero for a day or two. So I never lost my trousers.
"60 years ago, the work hard, play hard ethic was essential for dealing with the rigours of operational flying.
I'm in the front, right next to the pilot.
Oh man, he doesn't look like he's having fun, does he?
He doesn't look a happy bunny, does he?
These people are so small.
Today, the traditional blend of professionalism and high spirits continues.
Lovely.
But with only 5 weeks left, our modern RAF crew have a huge challenge on their hands if they're going to succeed as modern-day Dambusters.